Something I've always personally found really interesting is how much optimism is sort of linked with electoral success. So optimism is often used by political leaders sort of as a part of a wider strategy of upholding legitimacy once in power. So sort of no matter how dire things are for a society and no matter sort of the problems that we're facing as individuals, political leaders will often draw upon sort of an optimistic vision of the future to like legitimize the hardships that we're facing in the present day. It'd be really interesting to sort of get your thoughts on this. But I guess the question I want to derive from this is, what do we sort of do about positivity in the mind of perhaps someone considered harmful to the world?
So you're right. Optimism is, and once you start listening for this, you can't help but hear it everywhere. I mean, optimism is brandished almost by politicians, by policymakers, by anybody who wants to be in a leadership position, as people are always trying to kind of secure the optimist's position of themselves. And that, again, is kind of one of those things that's grounded quite deeply in the psychological piece of this. People like optimists, and people want to gravitate to optimists. People want to believe optimists. And that's not really hard to understand because, I mean, who do you want to hang out with? You want to hang out with someone who says everything's going to be terrible, like, come with me and things will be dreadful. I mean, that's not exactly a winning message, right? So it's not really surprising that, saying, I'm an optimist, things are going to be good is a powerful message. And so optimists do attract social and social power, social status, and as a result of that, economic status as well, assuming you're successful. I mean, if you are one of the entrepreneurs who crashes and burns, maybe not so much. But nonetheless, to a point, it's a useful way of gathering support. So politicians do kind of play this. I think the question of what do you do when it's someone considered harmful, that depends on your perspective, because optimism is also intrinsically subjective. My view of what constitutes a brighter future is not necessarily any of your views, whether individually or socially. And I think one of the, so if you kind of look at the US at the moment, one of the failings, I think, of the Democrat or the liberal side of things there was not recognizing that what was happening on the other side of the divide was an essentially optimistic message. And I've had some interesting experience with this because, at the time the book came out, we were talking to people in the States about it, and people on the liberal side of things almost universally rejected the idea that Donald Trump was putting out an optimistic message. This is all carnage and despair and violence, and division, which, in terms of what he was saying about the present day was true. But his slogan is "Make America Great Again." And his followers, people who like Trump, people who vote for his platform, are adopting an optimistic message there. They may be suspending their disbelief in him as an individual and his policies, but they are nonetheless taking the attitude that this is the way to go if you want America to be great again. Their ideas about what constitutes greatness for America are not my ideas about what constitutes greatness for America, but it is an optimistic message. I think the Democrats, this is getting into the weeds a bit, but I think the Democrats, by failing to recognize that and thinking that just exuding generally benevolent vibes would somehow overcome that without any kind of coherent policy platform or coherent messaging, drop the ball. And I think that until that's recognized, that won't, that side of the argument is not going to hold its own. You could say similar things about what's going on here at the moment. I think our current government has been criticised, I think rightly, for whatever else it may or may not be doing, for having completely failed to put over any sense of optimism about its programme or about where the country is headed. So.
How do we then keep positivity progressive, would you say?
Well, again, it depends what you mean by progressive. It depends on what you consider to be progress. I think there is a slightly two-layered answer to this. So one part of the answer to this is that there is a degree to which the idea of progress is itself something of a liberal or leftist kind of idea. Well, partly true. There's social progress, there's economic progress, and it's interesting that these have kind of these have tribalized in some ways, and social progress is associated with the left, and economic progress is associated with the right. And there's this kind of third way, which is emerging now, of the idea of technological progress, of techno-determinism, that actually technology will determine how we advance. I think, if you want to talk about how to be progressive, I think you have to pick which one of those, which amalgam of those that you would like to see. I think I've reached that age when I'm very much I'm kind of inclined to be centrist because, I'm a middle-aged man with children, and you kind of find yourself inexorably pushed towards the middle. But I find, I think defining progress depends on which measure of progress you choose to adopt. I think there was a time when you could say that actually what needed addressing was, I think there's a time when you could say that technological progress was where the game was at. For a large proportion of the 20th century, it was technological, medical, biological advance that defined how well we lived. Then I think there was probably a period during which it was economic progress that defined how well we lived. And there was a need to upgrade the way that we lived, the way that we organized ourselves. I think maybe now we're on the cusp of something else. And one of the things we get hung up on when we think about progress is trying to come up with perfect solutions or permanent solutions. I think you can see this in climate change at the moment. We're trying to come up with perfect solutions at a time which probably doesn't admit of them. I think it's probably gone too late. It's gone too far for us to say at this point there is going to be a perfect solution to climate change or any of the other associated environmental problems that we currently have. There isn't going to be a perfect solution right now. I think one of the ways in this kind of displacement shows up is it's worth remembering, I think, that climate change is a problem today because we had the Industrial Revolution, whatever it is now, more than 100 years ago now, 150 odd years ago. We had the Industrial Revolution. It led to an enormous upswing in our material standards of living. But one consequence of that is that we chucked a lot of carbon into the air. And we could have told a long time ago that was a problem. We didn't. But that's kind of, we had a very good thing happen in many respects. It led to a very bad thing, such is the nature of progress in some respects. I think it's worth remembering we can't set up permanent, perfect solutions. We have to do the best we can now. And doing the best we can now is better than doing nothing.